Welcome in to Red River North right here on Ghost SEC channel. Randy Heights, Dave Meyer, 1077 The Franchise. We've got a lot to talk about as we begin to shift from college baseball and Thunder basketball to OU football, which will be here in the blink of an eye. Randy went on a deal last week, was asked a question that got me thinking about some things this year. What was the most important game for OU in 25 coming up? A lot of people automatically say Texas. That of course, is natural annually. I had a different answer. I think Michigan, the second week in Norman, is vital for everything in this program as far as getting something positive going to start, kind of a belief around the program that things are going the right direction. And that was my answer. It had caught the guy off guard. We're going to have a Michigan guy on in a second to preview that game, but that's what I think. That's how much stake I have in that Michigan game.
I definitely think it's important. I'm not going to disagree with you because for what I think this team can do this year, record wise and everything, a lot of that has to do with me thinking they're going undefeated in the non-con.
Right.
And the biggest test in the non-con, no doubt, without question, is Michigan when you look at the other three opponents, So I think you're pretty much right on. And yeah, to me, it's easy to always go, a conference game is the key, whether it's Texas, Alabama, those are important, but I don't think you're wrong at all. It's about tone setting and that being in week 2, and people are buying in. It feels like, Dave, and I mean around the country. But if you lose in week 2 to Michigan, all that good vibe you got going from the off season, it goes away really quickly. So I mean, I think you're 100% accurate on that.
Yeah, and I mean that will change right over the season with the most important game. It's a must win. I think would be the best way to say it is Cord just chimed in backstage. But yeah, for everything you just referenced, you look at all the moves they made this offseason, you want to say, yeah, it was great. And it's awesome across the board, but you have to see it come to fruition. And if they go in under the lights at home, game 2, and lose to Michigan, that's not going to be a good way to start for OU football 25 when people are already kind of teetering on the edge of belief or not.
Well, and I think it goes even a step further with that, not only for the belief or anything. I think it's for the fact I'm not sure how good Michigan is. It's not like last year when Texas played Ohio State. They did play not last year. Whenever Wait, did they play Ohio State? Am I getting all my
Michigan? Texas played Michigan.
Yeah, they were the defending national champions. Sorry, it's this year they play Ohio State game. I'm getting all my schedules mixed up. Anyway, defending national champion. We knew they lost a lot, but it's still the defending national champ. We're talking about a Michigan team that, yes, had a better record than OU last year, but to me, they were still a lot alike. They weren't impressive. They struggled a lot, and everything like that. And so you're like, this is one they have to go win. It's very important for Oklahoma.
No, it absolutely is, and that's a tremendous segue as Clayton Safey, that works for the On3 version of the Wolverine.com, joins us. He covers Michigan football. Clayton, we were just talking about the most important game to Oklahoma this year. Look, I think it's Michigan for the fact that Oklahoma under Brent Venables has been up and down, and they sucked last year. This year, the fan base, the players, they need to have some kind of belief that things are working, and Michigan rolls in as another national power coming off a national championship year before last. To me, that's vital, and that's why we got you on tonight to preview that one. Kind of talk about how the Michigan folks and fan base view that game. Big one coming up in Norman.
Yeah, great to be here, guys. No, totally agree. It's a huge game for both teams because it's, they're both looking to get in the college football playoff, and this is going to go a long way to, not just avoid a loss, but also start to build some momentum for the season. And, if you're Michigan, you go into this game week 2 after likely beating New Mexico pretty handily. And, if you lose this one, then you're in a similar spot 2 weeks later. They go at Nebraska, and then they have 6 road games this year and kind of a unique schedule. So it wouldn't look good for the rest of the year. But, that's why it's so big. And both teams obviously disappointed last season. So they want to get back on the right track.
Clayton, Sharon's playing with a little more house money in the sense it's only year 2 for him. But
Mm-hmm.
I told Dave before you came on, to me, these two teams are very similar. A new coach in his second year, Brent Venables, of course, a little bit further along and a little more pressure on him. But coming off a national championship, having the type of year Michigan had last year, it feels like the pressure is almost as equal on Sharon coming into this year, just for the fact they're looking for that bounce back and to prove it wasn't just a 1 year, somewhat down year for the Wolverines.
Yeah. It's hard for me to say for sure because I don't know exactly what the situation is down there. I would probably say it's a little less pressure just because I think that they've recruited really well over the last year or so. They have a freshman quarterback coming in Bryce Underwood, who is as physically gifted as really anyone we've seen in a while here. So maybe you could point to the next couple seasons, but if the year doesn't pan out, well this coming season, then I think he's in the same spot maybe that Brent Venables is now. I guess that's the way I would view it. But and also he may be suspended for part of this season as well. So do you blame him for, if they lose a game or two while he's suspended because he wasn't there? And it would be potentially a self-imposed suspension, or do you say, hey, that's still on your record? So I'm not exactly sure. It's really complicated when it comes to that. But I think, Sharon Moore would have been in more of a pressure cooker here going into year 2 if they didn't beat Ohio State and Alabama at the end of last season. That helped a lot. The vibes were pretty high at the end of the year, even though they didn't accomplish what they set out to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Oklahoma mirrors that and the fact that they pulled off an upset against Alabama late in the season that kind of saved the bacon. But before that happened, I'm not sure where that was going to go at the end of the year. But you referenced Michigan last year goes 8-5, 5-4 in the league. I checked that schedule, and I think 4 out of the 5 losses were to ranked teams. It's not like you guys got beat by
playoff teams.
But playoff teams. So. When you look at this year and what you got coming back, you mentioned Bryce Underwood. Kind of talk about the expectations for Michigan this season.
Yeah. No, you're right. The schedule last year was unbelievable. It was an 8-5 team, probably more like a 9-3, 9-4, maybe a 10-3 team with a bowl game in a normal year. But there aren't normal years anymore. This is the new reality in college sports. They did get a bad draw though. Texas early. They scheduled that about 10, 15 years ago. Just like this game. And then, Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana ended up being good. No one thought that was going to happen. And They go down there, lose a tight one. So, but as far as this season goes, I think the expectations probably are a little bit lower than they were a year ago. But I think last year they were a little too high. I think people are expecting more this season than what they accomplished a year ago. I think they, believe that Michigan should be in the mix for the college football playoff here. And one of the reasons why is the quarterback position. It was, as you guys experienced last year, but Michigan's was probably much worse. It was dismal last season. They revolved 3 guys through there. I don't know. We could maybe argue that, but I saw those facial expressions. But Michigan had 3 guys in there. Alex Orji couldn't throw. Davis Warren, was just subpar overall, and a great kid, great story. Just didn't get it done. Former walk-on, probably shouldn't have been put in that spot. And they had Jack Tuttle, who started a game last year and then retired the next week because of health. So it was just a disaster at quarterback. The offense didn't give them anything, and it's amazing that the defense was as good as it was, given they had no help. And I think it could be similar said about Oklahoma a year ago. But that's why I find this matchup interesting, too. You have 2 great defensive minds who are going to be calling the defenses. Venables, I believe, calling the plays down there for them, and Wink Martindale, who really kind of started to figure out the college game in the back half of last season. Of course, spent a lot of years at the Ravens, coordinator of the New York Giants, all that. So, that'll be a big-time storyline, and both teams with new offensive coordinators coming into the year. So I think that Chip Lindsey, who comes in as Michigan's OC, spent the last couple of years at North Carolina, helped Drake May become a top 3 draft pick. Before that was made a bunch of different stops and had some pretty successful offenses. There's optimism that the offense can take a leap, but the offensive line's a question mark. So they need to protect Underwood. They need the weapons around him to make sure that he's as comfortable as possible in year one, because it's hard to win as a true freshman. It's hard to be steady and consistent throughout an entire schedule, especially one that's this loaded when you're going to be playing road games at Oklahoma and Nebraska, and Ohio State comes to town and things like that. So they got to have the help around him.
Let's go ahead and talk about Bryce Underwood. You mentioned him several times. He's the one, I think, around the country, everybody is waiting to see how good this kid can be. And you talk about coming in and, for all intents and purposes, we all feel like he's going to be the starter and, going into the start of the year. What's it been like watching this kid, just make that adjustment and come in and be able to take the reins? Because being a leader at quarterback is important for any team. What's it like watching a true freshman come in and try to be that right away, especially with all the upperclassmen?
It's a great question. It's been really fascinating to watch because you don't have a ton to compare it to. They haven't had a freshman quarterback come in with this type of hype probably ever. And I wasn't, really aware of it. Was too young when it was Drew Henson coming in early on. And of course, then, he went back and forth with Brady and all that. But even then, right, I mean, they needed Bryce Underwood to end up at Michigan, and it almost didn't happen, right? He was committed to LSU for 11 months or whatever it was. So, I do think he's ahead of the curve, not just with, the kind of talent he is as the number one overall recruit, but also he came in December. He got right to work and went through bowl practices with them, went through the winter conditioning, and then had 15 spring practices. He stayed healthy, and he got a ton of reps. He was one of only 2 healthy quarterbacks in spring ball. So he got a ton of those reps with the ones. And, you can see the physical gifts on display. I saw him in high school a couple times in person and then watch him in the spring game this year. He's got the big arm. He's really, really mobile. Probably an underrated part of his game is his running ability. And we'll see how much they use his legs this season as they try to keep him healthy as well. But the expectations are really high. Again, you worry a little bit about the offensive line and how they're going to be able to protect him, especially against teams like Oklahoma early on in the year. It takes sometimes offensive lines to a little bit to come together, but they got to be up to speed right away in this season because, teams like that they're coming. They're going to be trying to chase number 19 around and make life miserable for them.
Yeah, Clayton, Bryce Underwood, he has, of course, a ton of hype going to Michigan. It's kind of similar to Oklahoma gets the Gatorade National Player of the Year out of the state of Texas, Denton Guyer, with Jackson Arnold. And there was a lot of hype for him coming into last year, and he had experience in the college game. Started 2 games the season prior. We saw what didn't happen. It's such a different deal. I mean, for a true freshman to step on the field and start is tough when you have the expectations on top of that is the nation's top recruit, the big payday from Dave Portnoy. I mean, the guy, he's got a lot of shit to deal with right now, man.
Yeah, it's tough, and the live bullets, like you said right there, are just different than in practice or in high school. I mean, competing for state titles is a lot different than competing to be in the college football playoff, and those stages are way different. And he turns 18 years old in early August, less than a month before they go to Norman. So that's a lot on a 17, will be barely 18-year-old at the time. So, everything's got to be accelerated. Again, you got to have pieces around you and a great defense and a great kicker, which they do have as well. Probably the best kicker in the country last year, Dominic Zavada, who made 21 of 22 kicks, and 7 of them were from 50-plus. That set a career and season all-time record at Michigan. So, you try to limit maybe how much pressure you put on Bryce Underwood early on if you're the Michigan coaching staff. Make things simple for him, make him as easy as possible. But at the same time, in a tough environment, he may have to be the guy that goes in and wins you the game, and it's a tough ask.
You talk about the defense and everything, and it's been a staple for Michigan like it has in Oklahoma throughout the years. They lost a few guys on the defensive line. What's that depth like, and what's that defense looking like coming into this year after losing some of the things they lost in the draft last year?
You can't replace Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Those two were probably as good as it gets, and especially Mason Graham. But depth, the word you just said there, I think is huge, and it's something they're going to lean on. They still have some talented players there, but they brought in a couple guys out of the portal, and they feel like they have 6 defensive tackles that could rotate through and stay fresh. No one's going to play at the level that Graham and Grant did, but if you can stay fresh, have some talented bodies that you cycle through, and are better at some of the other positions like inside linebacker, which they have both returning starters back there, then perhaps you can be, a front seven that is somewhat comparable. But I do think Michigan's done a great job over the years of reloading it at that spot. There were questions about Mason Graham a couple years ago. How was he going to replace Mozzie Smith, who was a first-round pick at the nose tackle position? And then Mason Graham ends up being better than Mozzie Smith ever was. So not predicting someone will be better than him, but Rayshawn Benny is a name to watch there. He's coming back for his 5th season. He's been a backup his entire career, but only because he's had incredible talents ahead of him. He could be the next, first, second, third round, top 100 type of pick out of that defensive line. So still a lot of talent and some guys rushing off the edge too that are pretty dangerous.
Clayton, I know that we're in this new era, NIL, transfer portal. I'm still an old school guy, and I like the fact this matchup between Oklahoma and Michigan is cool because it's got 2 national blue bloods that don't play. I mean, Oklahoma, Michigan on the gridiron, you got to go back to the 70s to find out when that happened. Let's get down to the matchup, man. Oklahoma is going to be good defensively. They have a really good defensive front 7. Offense, kind of wait and see. You referenced Ben Arbuckle, the new OC, to go with John Mateer. Quarterback play can't be worse than last year, but everybody thinks that defense is going to be the strength. How do you kind of see that matching up against, Sharon Moore and Winks D, and then kind of how do you see the matchup playing out in Norman?
Yeah, it's so hard to say. I think that whatever quarterback OC combo kind of gets up to speed with the rest of the operation at their new school. And I know, the 2 guys coming in from Washington State to Oklahoma, they were together already. So that gives them a leg up, but whichever one is maybe better by week 2, or at least, running things smoother by week 2 probably wins the game, but could be a defensive slugfest. It's really hard to say. Both teams, really want to see their offenses improve. Both teams feel like the defense is going to be the strength of their team. How do I see it playing out? I guess I have predicted Michigan goes in there and wins it. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if it's kind of clunky and they go in and lose by 10 or 13 points or something like that too. It's going to be a big challenge. And, Oklahoma is one of the many teams on Michigan's schedule that you don't really know what to feel about them. There is a lot of pressure on Venables. They made changes on the offensive side of the ball for a reason. They brought in a bunch of transfers on the offensive side of the ball for a reason. So it's hard for me to tell exactly from my view, and you guys would know much more as to what the expectations are. But I'm expecting a really close, maybe low-scoring game, and then we figure out what the offenses are later on in the year. They got to get through this one somehow.
Clayton, when you look at the season as a whole for Michigan, I mean, you talk about young team growing up, and I think that's what makes the playoffs so good last year and coming into this year. You don't have to get off to the hot start. Whether a Michigan or an Oklahoma loses in week 2, it doesn't put you out of the playoff race. And I was noticing around here, even though Oklahoma was out of it early last year, it's really taken a fan base a while to realize, hey, college football is different now. Did you notice that at Michigan last year with the fan base that, hey, guys, just because you lose a game or 2 early, there's still a lot to play for. Did you notice that a lot with the fan base in Ann Arbor?
I did, and I think I noticed it too just around the Big Ten and the rest of the country as well, where even when Ohio State lost to Michigan, it felt like for them, their hopes and dreams were dead, and they win the national championship. And that's a team that finished 4th in the Big Ten standings. Now, it's unbalanced schedules. They were better than Indiana, but technically – and they beat Indiana. But technically, they were 4th in the Big Ten. So we have to kind of reframe how we look at this sport now. And the goal, I think, for teams like Michigan and Oklahoma is to get into the college football playoff and take your shot, right? If you can get a break like Notre Dame did with Georgia's quarterback being hurt, there's no longer the big talent gap between Georgia and Notre Dame to the extent that one injury, Georgia couldn't overcome that, right? So then next thing you know, Notre Dame is in the Final Four. Notre Dame is in the national championship game. So that's just one example. And Michigan and Oklahoma, Notre Dame, they've kind of been on a similar plane when they're at their best, right? Oklahoma goes and 3 straight playoffs and loses all 3. They could have won at least one of those. Michigan makes 3. They end up winning the national title, but they go to overtime as well in the Rose Bowl, like Oklahoma did back in the day. So teams like this, like the teams team I cover, the team you guys cover, they can be right in the mix for national titles as long as they kind of maybe get a break with the seeding, get a break with an injury or two, or maybe your team stays extraordinarily healthy. So we got to reframe it. It's tough to say. Like, the conference championship games don't matter as much as they used to. The rivalry games, unfortunately, right, they don't actually mean as much for your postseason hopes as they used to, as long as you take care of business in the other games. So it's fascinating. We're all still learning how to feel about this stuff, because it used to be the end of the world when you lost the game early on, or you lost that second game especially. But look at Georgia last year. They lose early to Alabama, and Alabama looked like the class of the country at that point, with Milroe and all them. And turns out by the end of the year, they didn't make the playoff thanks to Michigan, or thanks to Oklahoma, and then they lose to Michigan in the bowl game, and Georgia was in the playoff. So it's just tough it's more like the NFL. It's more like college basketball maybe than ever before.
Yeah, it is different, and it is tough to kind of get up to speed with it, especially if you're old school and you kind of like the way things were. I know that you said, and you're correct, that, your big rivalry games, if you lose it, as far as your season goes and what you might do, doesn't matter as much, but boy, does it still matter to the fan bases and players. As I recall, on a Thanksgiving weekend last year, watching a little dust up between Michigan and Ohio State. Man, talk about that rivalry and being in it from the inside.
Oh, well, I was as part of as I've ever been last year when I got pepper sprayed on the field, and kind of it was unbelievable. And it wasn't a direct shot. I wasn't doing anything, right? I was just doing my job, but we got some residual there. And I felt like for 10 minutes I wasn't going to be able to see again. But yeah, that rivalry is different, and it's ramped up, and it's been turned up to 11 probably the last few years since Michigan kind of got back in the mix. They lost, I don't even remember at this point, but I mean, it had been 10 years since they had beaten Ohio State. Ohio State had won like 17 of 18, something like that. Luckily for Michigan fans, those numbers aren't as fresh in our minds, but now 4 in a row. And, I can tell you, being on the field there after the game in Columbus, like, things, even though they had a chance and Ohio State, win or lose, was in the playoff, like, that thing mattered to every single fan that was in that building. That mattered to all those players on the field that walked off, including Jack Sawyer, who was crying by the end of the game, not because of pepper spray, because he lost and the team planted a flag on their field. So it's still fun.
They should be used to that.
Yeah. He leaves with no wins over Michigan. Same with that entire senior class, which is amazing to say, because it never in people's wildest dreams was that going to unfold. But the rivalry is as intense as it gets. And, Michigan's going for 5 straight for the first time since the 1920s this year, and they get Ohio State at home. Early spread, 5.5 points in favor of Ohio State, but I don't know if I'd touch that in their favor or Michigan's. I think it's kind of a coin flip, type of game at this point, but a lot of season to play out. But now, after last season, that upset, 19.5 point underdogs, you can never just assume one team's going to win a game like that. And you guys have seen it too with Texas, Oklahoma. It's just a different game than any other, one on that schedule.
And tell me if I'm wrong here with the rivalry, because of what you talked about when we talked about the expanded playoff. The one guy that's the happiest about the expanded playoff has to be Ryan Day, because that let them get in the playoffs, and they were a great team, win a national title. Because, Clayton, in my opinion, if it's the old format of 4 teams in, Ohio State's out. I'm not sure Ryan Day is still the coach at Ohio State with the way the rivalry is.
I agree with that. And that means he would have not made the playoffs 3 out of 4 years. Remember, they got in the 14th playoff in 2022, nearly beat Georgia in that game. So actually, you have to give him credit for the way his teams have rebounded after a few weeks off losing that game. I guess that sounds like a backhanded compliment, but it actually is a real compliment. Of course, they won the national title last year, but no, totally. I think things would be different. I think guys like Ryan Day, coaches like James Franklin, who somehow got to the Final Four last year, they had an easy draw, but it is what it is. Now I'm seeing them as number 1, number 2 type preseason team in the country, but they love the 12-team playoff, because it allows you to kind of get in if you have the right schedule. And, like we saw with some of these teams last season, and, that's going to satisfy the fan base a little bit. And then there'll always be that next challenge, right? You got to win a game, you got to win 2 and all that. But, programs like Michigan and Oklahoma that didn't make it in the first year of the format, like, I think both fan bases would be pretty happy getting in and taking their shot, maybe winning a game this year and then kind of going from there.
Yeah, completely agree, Clayton. I just got one more question for you. Are you going to be in Norman week 2 for the big one?
I will be, and I could use some food recommendations. Friday night dinner, where do we go? Saturday breakfast, is there a spot? What do I do?
It depends on if you're staying in the city or are you staying in Norman.
Nothing booked yet, but I think we're thinking OKC just for prices and all that.
Oh,
Yeah,
don't
it
worry.
totally makes sense.
We got you covered across the board. Whether you stay in the
Pretty
city,
much,
stay in Norman, we got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Midtown Oklahoma City would be a lot of great restaurants for you.
Okay.
Right there, yeah. There's several good places.
Love it.
Awesome, Clayton. Well, hey, man, can't thank you enough for hopping on, and we'll maybe do it again as the game gets a little bit closer. Just a few beers, few sunburns, and it'll be here.
That's right. Summer, slow down, but can't wait.
Yes.
And let's talk game week, guys.
Sounds good. Clayton,
Thanks, Clayton.
Wolverine.com. Have a good one, Clayton.
You too.
Randy, I thought, he was pretty apropos as far as talking about the Wolverines. Look, I mean, Sharon Moore wins the national championship. Yay, they're happy. They go 8-5 a year ago, and now people are like, now what are you going to do? You got the nation's top recruit coming in. You get the sense that game for Michigan is just as important as it is for Oklahoma.
And it is. And I mean, I don't know if, you kind of answered the question like I was asking it, but I do feel like Brent and Sharon are a lot on the same level, even though Sharon's only in his second year. I don't think he's going to get fired like we all think if Brent doesn't do it. But basically, he's just a year behind Brent because that year they had last year, yeah, they went, what was it, 8-5 overall last year? That was an ugly, ugly 8-5. They had some games in there they could have and should have lost, and some games maybe they should have won. But that is just a program you sit there and go, hey, Sharon, if you remember, Dave, was it midseason last year? And there was talk because he hadn't signed his contract yet, like,
right.
Oh, are they going to try to find a way to get out of this deal right now? And then it turns around. They beat Ohio State. And when you're having a year like that, kind of like if Brent would have beat Texas last year in a down year, a lot of the bad would have been soothed over before the offseason even, but they didn't. Michigan, on the other hand, got to play their big rival last week of the season. They get a big win. And it was kind of like, oh, we're going to forget about those 5 losses now. We're all good. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So that's just how it goes with programs like this. And I think it's going to be a very interesting year for Michigan. And we didn't ask. I forgot. I wanted to bring it up. The fact I know he's talking Underwood and everyone's building him up, but they went and got another quarterback out of the portal this week.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. You always need depth. I don't know what, Underwood's backup status is, but he referenced him also maybe going to be suspended for a game or so this year. You got to have someone taking snaps if that happens. I don't know what that would be for. I must have missed that story, but if they get another quarterback, I'm completely on board, and I'm with you. This is something that if Michigan loses to OU week 2, that pressure that was on Sharon Moore that you're talking about will be ratcheted right back up to where it was midseason last year.
Yeah, I mean, and like I say, again, I don't think he's getting fired, but it's going to be one of those, if it all goes haywire the rest of the year, because you mentioned it just like he did. It's a freshman quarterback. You don't know what you're going to get. Underwood goes out, and even if he starts all 12, but let's say he plays a little like Jackson Arnold did, and that offensive line's not good for Michigan, say some of those things. Literally, it's mirror images of last year's Oklahoma team.
Yeah.
Say a lot of those same problems happen. I still don't think he gets fired, but if all of a sudden they're at a 6-6 spot at the end of the year with the loss to Ohio State, I don't care the fact, because again, Moore's only got 1 win over Ohio State. Those Harbaugh wins and the 4 in a row, those other 3, they don't go in his category, It will be really interesting to see. I don't think they're going to be that bad. I'm just saying, it's going to be – that's why that week 2 matchup is so big. And it's bigger for Oklahoma because they're the home team.
Sure.
You get a little bit of a pass in week 2 with a freshman quarterback on the road. If Michigan was at home, I think it would be a little interesting if they lost that game to Oklahoma. That pressure would be really bad on Sharon at that point in time.
Yeah, you know what's weird? You see the good and bad when you get a guy like Underwood, right? It's always great for your program to get, the nation's top guy, and everybody's talking about you in the offseason, and you have all these expectations. But if it doesn't go well, I mean, boy, does that take away the excuses you might have had for quarterback play. And the thing is, we don't know with Underwood. I'm with Clayton. I watched some tape on Underwood play in high school. The guy's really good. This ain't high school. It's college football. That game in Norman is going to be the first one he plays on the road as a true freshman in college. Oklahoma hasn't really been a snake pit as far as the environment goes, but I was impressed with the crowd last year in year one SEC. I thought they really accepted that challenge and became more of a daunting place to come in. That's going to be a tough game for Michigan. It's going to be a tough game for Oklahoma. It's a good segue, Randy. I wanted to talk to you about what I think. I haven't got your take on this yet, but what I think is going to be the kind of the bench setter on this Oklahoma 25 team, the cornerstone. That's the defensive front. I think with David Stone coming back and getting another 300 plus pounder back in the mix for depth to go with Jaden Jackson and Dominique Williams and Grayson Halton. That's a lot of talent in that defensive rotation. Not even talking about R. Mason Thomas, who was second in the SEC in sacks a year ago. Him coming back, I thought, was huge, and making that commitment to come back and get better. Then you got PJ Adebawore, and to me, he's kind of the hidden key in this, man. He's got NFL attributes physically. If he can grasp it mentally, that becomes a very, very daunting defensive front four.
Yeah, and don't forget about transfer Jones Jr. coming in as well. It's like I think that front line is very big, but we've talked about it, the front seven. I think all of those pieces in general, because what you lose maybe from a, Stutzman going, but a Kobe coming in, who again I've been high on, what you lose from Stutzman to McKenzie, you make up for with the Jaden Jackson or the Halton or the Stone. It's really interesting how this mixture of guys in that front seven, I feel like, really are complementing ways in the sense of what you lost at one position and you gain in another. It's the perfect mesh, I feel like, to have, I think, really a prominent, dominant type front seven in the sense with pass rush, with stopping the run, with really going back to what we've talked about. As long as the offense can move the ball and hold the ball some, just alone, that takes this defense to another level.
Yep.
As long as they're not on the field for 45 minutes or the 60 minutes. And it felt like at times last year they were, and that's where we're going to see, I think, a drastic improvement in this defense just from that alone.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, you talk about what guys like Dominique Williams, Jaden Jackson, what everybody thinks David Stone can do and make the leap by reestablishing the line of scrimmage and holding up blocks. Who does that benefit? Well, the linebackers behind them, and they were really good at that last year. I think they're going to be better this year. Who does that benefit? Well, Kip Lewis and Kobe McKenzie. So maybe that kind of negates the loss. I still don't want to sweep, losing Stutzman under a rug. I do think losing an All-American.
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge, and we're going to have to see that they can replace him. Not just what he did on the field, which was big. He made a lot of game-changing plays, but his leadership, man. He was the leader of OU football, the unquestioned leader for 2 years, and that's gone. So, I mean, it's not just a play on the field. I do think they have the guys, waiting in the wings. We both love Kobe McKenzie, and Kip Lewis, I think, is an absolute star, but they're going to have to take the field and show they can do it. But that defensive front will help them get there.
No doubt. And I think you're right. The leadership, because I think talent-wise,
Right.
that's always,
Right.
and I don't mean to make it light, talent-wise is always easier to replace than leadership. You can find other guys that are just as talented or maybe just a little bit less talented or even more talented. But it's what that leadership that Danny brought on the field, and Billy Bowman even,
Right.
To control those defensive areas of the field and take a leadership role. Who's going to step up into that role? Just because either Osimo or McKenzie is going to be that starting spot where Danny was, doesn't mean they're going to be that leader. Who's going to be that guy that steps up when things get a little erratic on the field and maybe an offense starts driving, and it's a chance that things could spiral out of control? Who's going to be that Bowman? Who's going to be that Stutzman that steps up and goes, all right, guys, we know what we're doing. Calm down. Let's breathe. Let's just make this stop and get off the field. That's, I think, what, to be honest, in my opinion, that's what they're looking for going into this season more than anyone for talent or anything like that. Who's going to be that guy that everyone looks at on the field and goes, that's our leader. What's he telling us to do?
Yeah, the voice, right? The voice in the locker room, the voice on the field, that when things aren't going right, that they got you. And, Danny Stutzman was it for 2 years, on top of being a very good player. I'm with you. I don't want to make it sound like I'm, diminishing what he did on the field as an athlete, because he was
Right.
awesome. He was a Butkus candidate and an All-American. But I do think behind him they might have guys with Asamoah and Kobe McKenzie that are as good, talented-wise, as far as being athletes. And we'll get to see that. Who's going to be the leader? I don't know. I do know that defensive front, everything starts and stops with that in the Southeastern Conference. And Oklahoma and Brent Venables, you can say what you want, and I have, a lot of people have, but I have to give credit where it's due. You look at what they've got coming into this year, year 4, that's usually when they say, a coach is supposed to have his players and his culture and the way things, he wants it to be. If you're going to win by a defense, and then I think that's the mantra you have to win championships, defense is what's going to do it. It's what's going to win championships, and I have to give credit to Brent and Oklahoma. They have built this defensive wall, and I'm impressed with how they did it. These are SEC caliber athletes across the front, and they've got SEC depth behind it. So that bodes well for this team in 25. That's got to be the bedrock of any team that's going to win in this league.
100%. And I think when you look at it with like what Clayton was saying, Michigan's got 6 defensive tackles.
Right.
I feel like Oklahoma across the board, they've got 8 guys that can rotate in there from the defensive end to defensive tackle. To your point, they definitely, I feel like, built the defensive side up to be SEC ready in year 4 for Brent. Now the question is the offense there? That's what we got to wait and see.
Well, we diced it up a lot. It can't be worse than last year, literally. I mean, Lord, I went back and watched.
I hope not.
Dude, if it is, and I mean, Katie bar the door and fire the staff week 2. That's why I think that Michigan game is vital, man. I mean, if they're able to come in under the lights and beat Oklahoma week 2, with people already just kind of bought in, the fan base thinks it's going to be better, but if that happens, yeah, not going to be good. And Auburn, Jackson Arnold rolls in, say that he puts up 300 yards and 3 touchdowns on a win. Not going to be a good look,
Yeah.
Maybe Nick Anderson and Bauer Sharp go to LSU, and they're having great years at the same time this is happening. I mean, it can go sideways fast, but with that defense and with the changes they made in the offense, I don't think it does. I've been impressed across the board, but the whole thing is, we're not going to know this till August 30th. The moves look good on paper. We can give them an A, but it means dick up until, kickoff.
And you're right, but I think the one thing, and it's kind of funny, without saying it, I felt like Clayton said it. At least the difference in these 2 teams, it's the simple fact that Arbuckle and Mateer are coming in. They've had a year together, and that's another good reason, or a good thing with catching Michigan in week 2.
Right.
That chemistry is still trying to be formed between a coordinator and a quarterback. That's something Oklahoma's got a year jump on, and everything. And look at what McShay said this week about how intriguing of a pro prospect the Mateer is, and everything like that. That's what I think for Oklahoma fans, that's what should give them that boost of, hey, you know what? You should feel really good going into this year. Because, again, we know, I think, what one side of the ball is going to give you.
Right.
And I think at least you should feel pretty positive that the offense is going to be drastically, not just a little better, but drastically better than it was last year.
Yeah, and I think people are starting to catch on nationally. I mean, I'll reference CBS Sports last week. The cover was boomer or bust with Brent Venables on the cover. I think Phil Steele has Oklahoma ranked. He's kind of crazy. I don't know if the guy drinks or what, but he's got Oklahoma ranked 8th in the country preseason, not SEC, but 8th in the nation.
I think that's a little strong, but I will say Phil Steele is one of the best preseason magazines you can get.
I've been reading it for years, yeah.
And with his rankings, I mean, I don't think they're that good, but I do think they're a playoff team, or at least going into the final week of the year
in contention.
Yeah. So I mean, it may not be out of the question.
I get where he's coming from. I get having lofty expectations, but when you've got that, then what do you have? You've got pressure on top of already being year 4, on top of already being the year that you're supposed to have the program the way you want it, your recruits, your culture, on top of a losing season. So, I mean, there's reasons for optimism, and there's reasons to think this team is going to turn a corner. I think they do. You think they do. I like 8-9 wins, which in the SEC is going to put them right in that playoff conversation. So
Yeah.
they got to take the field and do it. Is my point. And they're going to have a lot of pressure when they do.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's going to be a fun year. I'm ready for college football. We're 74 days away, was it, or 71
Wow.
days? I don't know. Somewhere
Seems
in
like
there.
yesterday we were like 98 days. Yeah, it's going to be your fast, man.
And so it's cruising by. And I guess the other reason I'm ready for it, it's like it's great talking about it. But to your point, like we won't know anything until the 30th.
Right.
It's like, oh, just can we get there where we can at least see something, Because it's even like if you got to watch scrimmages, you're not going to know anything. I don't care. I've covered college football for 30 years, gone and covered two-a-days. You can see guys and go, yeah, they're athletic freaks, but again, they know everything that's happening. That side knows everything that's happening. You don't know until you take on somebody that's in a different jersey than you. No matter
Yeah.
how good you look in scrimmages and practices, you really don't know until they step on the field against somebody that's from another school.
That always cracked me up being at practices or whatever. And you just take a picture and send it out. And people are like, oh my God, we look great. We're going to win the national championship. I'm like, come on, y'all. It doesn't work that way. We got to see this team actually play football. Not much you can gauge from that, but yeah, we're going to be talking about it all the way up until then. Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Coastal Carolina moving on to the championship series, College World Series, awaiting their opponent, LSU and Arkansas, underway right now. Randy, Coastal, dangerous ass team, man. I would not want any part of them, but LSU isn't scared of anybody. So if they happen to win, I wouldn't be surprised if the Tigers win with the pitching they have. And Arkansas, I've picked as the best team in college baseball. So it's going to be an awesome final, no matter who it is.
I will say this: LSU wants to win tonight. Kind of the same reason we were texting back and forth. There's an advantage to being undefeated and in the winners bracket. You get to set your. We remember it from when Oklahoma did this. In 22, it's like you get to set your weekend rotation up for the most part. And all of a sudden, if you lose, like if Coastal would have lost and LSU loses, that puts you on even ground with whoever comes out of the other side of the bracket.
Right.
Now, to me, it's more important than ever for LSU to win tonight. You don't want to have to go, since Coastal is sitting back in their hotel room waiting for Saturday. You don't have to go back out tomorrow on Thursday and play another game. Use more pitching. Even with the day off, you're going to use a starter that you may have started on Sunday, let's say, or Saturday. You're going to use that guy up. You can't afford to do that, especially when somebody's won. I say that Ole Miss did it and won the series, but
yeah, I was going to say you had to bring it up, man.
but I mean, for the most part, it puts you in a bad spot. But yeah. I like, even though you and I both picked Arkansas, I kind of like LSU to go ahead and win it out tonight. I don't know if Arkansas can pull it off, even though they're good pitching and everything else, and I love their offense. LSU's really good too. And you gave them that advantage of, hey, you laid an egg in game one. It usually comes back to bite you when you're two equal teams playing each other.
Yeah, they did have to go up against Cade Anderson, who's pretty good. And to your point, if LSU wins, they're going to have both those guys, Cade Anderson, Andrew Ianson, rested, ready to go for Coastal. I don't care who the other team is. I would like the team that has Cade Anderson and Andrew Ianson pitching back-to-back. Of course, that's what we thought with Oklahoma in 22. They were in the exact same spot Coastal is. It didn't matter. But whoever wins tonight is going to play Coastal. If it's LSU, they're set up very well. Randy, I just don't think Arkansas with Dave Van Horn, for whatever reason, can get over this hump. It's got to be a mental thing by now. By
far and away it is. I mean, and I feel bad for them because it's a lot of people go, oh, it's a Dave Van Horn mental thing. But if we all remember, 3-4 years ago, the Oregon State series where they had it won and going to win a national title, that was a player drop ball. That had zero to do with coaching. And you just kind of wonder, did Arkansas do something? Like, did they go into did they go into the swamps in Louisiana and find some black magic that went against them? Because it's not just all coaching. Just like, to be honest with you, game one this year in the series, you don't expect the performance out of Root coming into that game that he had. Didn't even last 3 innings. He's been dominant, and it's just kind of like, it's just those head-scratching moments, But, yeah, it's been wild, Dave. I think it's been a pretty decent College World Series. Not the greatest, but it's kind of funny we say that. Some of the best games I've seen in a while in the College World Series have happened this year. It's just all the excitement waits till the end, kind of like yesterday's Louisville Oregon State game.
Right. Great
It's kind
game.
of a flawed game. And then what? The
Eighth inning rolls around and
Whew.
it's like, oh my God.
Yeah,
just
man.
all
I
in
mean,
the
I
ninth.
think the
Just-
top ninth and bottom of the ninth, you saw more runs combined than the entire game. It's gotten a lot better, and I think
Yeah.
that Arkansas has to get past this LSU mental hurdle too. Of all teams you got to play to go advance to win the national championship, you have to play LSU, the notorious Bayou Bengals, just everything that has to do with college baseball. You got to get past that. If they do, I like Arkansas to beat Coastal Carolina. Actually, I hate to say this, whoever wins tonight, I like to win the national championship.
100%.
I have whoever wins tonight winning it, which is funny considering and I'm not anyone over in Chetney SCC because I could give two shits about a conference, and everything else. But as much crap as the SCC took after round, the regional round, all the teams making it, and only this many teams made it to the super regional. They ended up having the most teams in the College World Series from a conference.
Yep.
They end up guaranteed a team in the national title and more than likely winning the national title again.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
People, we say it's the best conference in the country for a reason. No one's just throwing it out there. Trust me, again, I'm not a closet SEC guy. I'm glad OU's in the SEC, but I'm not one over there going chant SEC. But for God's sakes, there's a reason everyone says it's the best conference in the country year in and year out. It's because they're always playing for the national title.
No doubt, man. And look, you can't be an OU Texas fan or any fan of anybody outside the SEC for the last, 15 years and not have built up some kind of I won't say hatred, but some kind of animosity towards the SEC because of the bias and the constant, they're the best. It just means more. I've dogged it. I've made fun of it. You've made fun of it. But when it gets down to it, they're the best in athletics. And if you can't admit that, then you're just denying what you see with your own eyeballs. So I
They
think
won a track and field national title in men this past week in Texas
there you
A&M.
go. What? Oh, it was A&M.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
they
can't they
shared
do,
it
man?
with
USC. Shared it with USC.
Who won the golf national championship this year?
Oklahoma State. For me.
Yeah.
They got really hot in the tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
They
I didn't think they were doing that well throughout the year. They
They
must have
were
got
doing good. They were solid. And everyone had
Said it was a team that was good enough to win it
oh.
if they got their heads on straight. And pretty much that final weekend came in the national tournament. They got their heads on straight.
Well, OSU's a national power in golf. Congrats.
Yeah.
And wrestling, they're good at that too. How about the pitching coach Oklahoma State hired? Any thoughts on that?
I really like
The
that.
hire, I talked to Mark Henderson at work, a friend that's a season ticket holder for Oklahoma State. I mean, the guy's had the last 2 years, he's been at Oregon. They've had two really solid staffs up there, done very well. And I think the big key for Oklahoma State, because I think as good as the Big 12 is, how much do they want to play in the portal? They're going to have to do some things because they had some guys back out of commitments after Rob Walton left. They had some guys get in the portal. He's going to have to rebuild a lot in Stillwater. So are they going to get in and play in that portal game? And I know it's still open for incoming. You can't get in the portal, I don't think, anymore, if I remember correctly, unless you're the teams, in the World Series still. It's like they got to figure things out. They've got to get some guys in there. And
Did this hire take a little too long? That's kind of my question. Even
Well,
if it's a good
I get
Yeah.
it because it went through the portal period while they were still deciding on this, or that he could have been recruiting guys to replace who you're talking about. I do like it for the fact he's young. I think he'll connect with recruits a little bit more than their former pitching coach that had been there for a long time. Wish Rob Walton all the best, but to me, yeah, it's a solid hire, man. Oregon, that's tough to argue with. They've had a good pitching staff, good college baseball program, so we'll see what happens up at O'Brien next year, and we'll I'm sure talk about it next week. Randy, any closing thoughts you have?
Not really. I mean,
and just keep watching the portal for college baseball. I think there's at least one more looky here out there for Oklahoma that we haven't put a name to a face, but it's done well. And overall, let's keep moving towards college football. We're getting there.
We're getting there. All right, man. Well, I will see you Friday up at the office.
See you, man.
Everybody else, we will talk to you next week. For Randy Heights, I'm Dave Meyer. Talk to you down the road.